Greetings, welcome back to my channel. This is just a brief introduction of the struct concept in Racket. If you look before, we defined a deck using vector. And, well, that was this was interesting and useful. We had to define a lot of these, basically, if you look at these, like first, last, and all these types of things, a lot of getters and setters, to be perfectly honest, and we simplified this a great bit by just using some certain types of things. But this is not necessarily the greatest use of vectors. When you have something in Racket that is much better off, you're better off using structs. And what a struct is, it very much works like a struct in C, in the fact that you just basically have a set of values that are contained within the struct. In this case, we have a node, and what a node has is it has a value in a previous and a next. Again, since Racket is dynamically typed, we don't have to necessarily specify what the types are, but this value could be potentially any type, but previous and next will also be a deck node. Now, I define a kind of a convenience constructor here to make a new deck node with just a value that makes sure that the first and next are empty lists or null. Essentially, this is what you could think of as null. You can also put, some people would put false here as like a placeholder for the default thing until the previous and next were set. It all is the same thing. And then we define a second struct, which is the deck itself, which has a length and it has a first and a last. And so now what we do is, again, I define a convenience constructor for making a new deck that is empty. And that means length is 0, and the first and last deck nodes are also nil, or just empty lists. And then I've gone ahead and rewritten deck push, pop, and enqueue, 3 functions here, based on that. And now what you'll do is you see that the logic is very similar, but the fact is that I don't have to define the set deck first, set deck last, or length functions. They are provided for me. In this case, they're technically functions. They don't return a value though. And you can see that the setters for deck node next, deck first, and length are also defined. And so we don't have to do those, and that's what the struct mainly does, is declare all those getters and setters so it makes sure that they work properly. And so it's very simple, very straightforward. The thing about it is interesting, and we will get more into this a little bit later, is how does this struct thing work in terms of defining these functions and making them available as when you call this struct thing. And that's what we're going to look into, and it's going to be a good introduction to metaprogramming in Racket. So now if we run this, we can see that it works quite exactly as we expect here, and it's fairly straightforward now in terms of, instead of using, or to be more honest, abusing the notion of a vector as basically a place to hold mutable state, we're doing this in a much more responsible way. And also there's lots of options about how you generate these things, how the structs generate, what things get generated, what functions get generated, and so on and so forth. So anyway, this is a very brief video, but getting back in the habit of posting some content. If you have any questions, please do post them in the comments below. And I'm looking forward to introducing metaprogramming in the next video in our series. Thanks, and have a good day.